Yeah.
My favorite.
It's Judd's Hockey Show.
Welcome into Judd's Hockey Show. Happy 4th of July as that comes up. Happy National Hockey League free agency and happy NHL draft, which just was completed. It's Judd, it's Declan, and it's Jesse Pierce, who in the very great tradition of hockey, the bar down beauty is, yes, at a golf course,
I'm jealous.
in a golf cart. Yes, but look, I mean, is there anything more perfect for a hockey person than to be spending time as we near July in a golf cart?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my game is about as bad as the Wild's playoff record, so that's fine. It's, I hit the green a little bit more than they hit the net, but we're working on it. It's all good.
Well, that's a good start, actually. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
All right, so let's look back and then obviously look forward with NHL free agency starting. I think it starts at 11 a.m. our time on Saturday. But let's go to the draft. And Jess, Dex and I did a very brief episode yesterday because of the consternation that we saw about the pick of Charlie Stramel. And I believe it's Stramel from what I've seen in the pronunciation, from Wisconsin, a center, 6'3", 222. But now with the draft done, I find it interesting. I actually find it to be a good thing that the Wild's first three picks, so first round and then two second round picks, Stramel, 6'3", 222. Rasmus, I'm going to go with Kumpelainen. He is the second round pick, a center, 6'3", 190. And then, thank God for this name, Riley Height. He is the 64th overall pick in the second round, center, 5'11", 180. Bill Garrett and Judd Brackett, the Wild's director of scouting, made no secret of the fact that they were intent on basically going after centers because the organization is so depleted or has been there. So what are your what are your thoughts on the first three picks, starting with Stramel, who I think a lot of people were surprised and disappointed by with the 21st overall pick?
And that's unfortunate because, Charlie Stramel, he is a Minnesota native, right? A dream come true. And a lot of people were dogging on the pick. I don't think they were necessarily dogging on him as a player, although there still are a lot of question marks around him just based on how he has performed at the collegiate level and whether that's going to be able to grow into a future NHLer. But the big question I had is, it seems like a reach in the first round. I mean, really, I feel like he would have been hanging around in the second if he was still a high priority. It just seemed very peculiar that they really reached for that with their number 21 overall pick. Ultimately, Judd, I think he must have been in Billy's ear with the size too. If you notice though, a lot of these guys, huge size up the middle, which I think is great. Again, how that works out once they grow into their game a little bit more and their body, no pun intended. I'm always curious about that, but yeah, I don't hate it. Riley Height, the name that is easy to pronounce, also I think is their best pick. I am very excited about that. I caught glimpses of him at the international level. That pick I'm particularly excited about. I'm surprised he hung around as long as he did for the Wild to get him with their their third pick overall, but their second round there. Overall, I think it's a B class in general from top to bottom. I'm not disappointed. Again, we've talked about it on this show before. We've talked about it with the Buttes. It's hard to assess where a 17-year-old is going to be. I know Dex loves his prospects. I know he loses sleep at night about these players, but it's at the end of the day, it was a fine draft for the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, I mean, Jess, what I told Judd was, you're taking the bet that you have three guys here that you drafted in the first two rounds, and if one of them pans out and becomes a serviceable NHL player, that's kind of the goal here. I think to assume all three of them, come up in the next few years and are contributing to the NHL is probably a little far-fetched with prospects. But I think if one of these guys develops quickly enough, we'll see what Stramel does if he ends up staying at University of Wisconsin, which all indications I believe he is indeed staying and playing college hockey. We'll see how long he stays there. Does he burn an entry-level deal when he comes here? Does he take his time? But they're basically betting that here in one of these three picks, that one of them in the next few years will hopefully turn out to be a solid NHL player for them.
Can we talk about how there were no trades during the draft from
I know, it sucked.
Though?
The first round, I watched the entire, I geeked out. I watched the entire thing. It was like 3+ hours. It was like an old baseball game from last year. And there were no trades. I was so disappointed. What happened?
Just
Where's
boring.
the excitement?
Yeah, give me
Super
something.
boring.
Right.
Super boring.
Great suits, though. great suits, great swag from all the boys. In particular, Adam Fantilli. Did you see that? How he had the names of
It was
every
awesome.
single person. That is
Well,
so cool.
I think the Ducks. So I will comment on top 5 picks. I think the Ducks screwed up. I think Fantilli's a special player. I love that kid. He's a good kid. You can tell he is sharp. I was really surprised he didn't go to the Ducks. And to your point, though, of no trades, here's my question. With their first pick, Arizona and Montreal both reached. Why not trade back?
Mm-hmm.
Nashville spent all day on the day of the first round trying to get the Canadiens to give them, I think, pick 5 in a trade. It would have been great. And Montreal's like, we're not going to move off pick 5. So I'm thinking, okay, they got a plan here, right? They reached. Arizona reached. So I was really disappointed. But on the Wild thing, here's where I struggle. 2 things. And look, it's pick 21. So it's really hard for me to assess the pick, like the player. But where I struggle with criticism is this. One is when Judd Brackett got this job, came from the Canucks to take this job, like his resume was really impressive. People were singing his praises. So now do we suddenly think he's not that smart? And then my second problem is, and I'm now being accused of being a Guerin defender, but I criticized him flat out for not putting a priority on centers. Like that was my whole thing. Like he's like, Ryan Hartman's fine. I'm like, I don't really think he's fine. Like, I don't think that your centers outside of Eck, and look, Goudreau, who I know is like a second son to Dino, but and he's a hard worker, but he's not a premium guy. So when you're going to use 3 picks on a position, especially for taller guys, first picks a right-hand shot, I have a hard time justifying then coming back and saying it's the wrong guy. So I really struggle with criticizing it because I've been begging Bill Guerin to do exactly this.
You're feeling guilty, then, is what you're saying. You feel like you have to team up with Billy because, hey, I've been asking for it. Now they've finally fed it. And you know what? You and the rest of the Wild fan base, you guys have been screaming for this. It was center, center, center. There you go. He did what he did. I think the question is, especially with how deep the center class is, yes, you weren't going to get Connor Bedard. You weren't going to get Adam Fantilli. That's fine. There were still some other players, I think, that could have been, that were considered, quote unquote, best available at 21 than Charlie Stramel. Again, it's not a knock on him as a player. It's just the fact he probably was going to hang around for a little bit longer. I get if the Minnesota really wanted him. And you know what? Who knows? They probably saw something in him that we're not seeing. But that year at the University of Wisconsin raises a lot of questions. Like, why would you go? I don't even think Charlie was probably aware that he'd be a first-round pick, let alone for his hometown team. But you're right, Judd. They went centers. They went center heavy. They even picked up a few defensemen in the later rounds, which is also a need that's going to need to be replenished. So again, ultimately, yeah, good job.
The one of us. I mean, we drafted 3 one of us members, right? We drafted 3 Minnesotans, which I feel like past Wild regimes have usually kind of stayed away from drafting Minnesotans, ironically enough, in this state of hockey. So they're taking also a couple bets on some Minnesota kids, which is good. But I think with Stramel, probably stay at Wisconsin, build up some of that value if he wants to bolt in March. And whether that's an entry-level deal or he does the amateur tryout where he doesn't burn that first year, we'll wait and see. But he's probably in line to go back to Wisconsin, kind of recoup some of the value, get his game together a little bit more before making a probably more significant decision.
On the one of us aspect, it kind of surprises me because I remember when Nick Bukestad came back to Minnesota and Bill Guerin was very adamant that nope, he needs to know it's a business. He needs to know this. Ever since they brought Bukestad back, it's been a run of Minnesota kids where at the time it seemed that Guerin was kind of very against that. Like, we don't love the hometown thing. We're not going all about that. But you have. So I do find that interesting because Bill Guerin knows what that's like firsthand. As a Massachusetts kid, he went back and played for the Bruins, talked about how difficult that was, talked about how difficult it would be, again, for Nick Bukestad at that time. And ever since, it's Golly and Faber and a slew of Minnesota kids, which is great. And I know a state of hockey, love it. And there is plush talent in Minnesota. Do not get me wrong by any stretch of the imagination. I just find it funny because I always go back to that press conference that Billy had. And it seemed like, okay, this was kind of a one-off deal. But it certainly hasn't been.
On prospects, do we think that Brackett changed that a bit too?
Potentially, I guess, right? I mean, Judd Brackett does have eyes everywhere, and he himself is everywhere. And I think there's probably been so many years of wallowing. Oh, the best Minnesotans don't play for Minnesota. Oh, wow. Oh, boo-hoo. All of this. Blake Wheeler is available now, guys, just so you know. But no, I mean, it's possible because there is ripe talent here without question, especially when it comes to USA hockey players and American-born players. You're going to find the best of the best in Minnesota. But yeah, I mean, I suppose Judd Brackett, he would be the one that would have to change Bill's mind on that. And Billy saw the light as the state of hockey is the mecca of hockey.
Or something like that. So the Wild drafted 6 guys. I went through the first 3. The last 3, defenseman Aaron Pionk, who is, of course, Neil Pionk's brother, he's 6'1". Caleb Parker, who is from Clavitt, Saskatchewan, 6 feet. Jimmy Clark, who's from Edina, 6 feet. In other words, of the 6 guys they drafted, Riley Height is the only one, and he's close at 5'11", who's under 6 feet. I do love this. I think that this screams to me, I'm not sure about you guys, but this screams to me, we're going to start drafting playoff players. And playoff players are bigger, they're stronger, and I mean, these kids don't weigh a ton now, but again, to be fair to them, they're kids, they're children, basically. But I think, it doesn't surprise me because I'm sure Bill Guerin favors size and ability to play physical, but watching the playoffs and watching what the Blues did with their defensive core a couple years ago in winning the Stanley Cup, and now the Golden Knights, I absolutely love this trend towards we need more size at certain positions and getting that size.
Yeah, I would agree. They need to all kind of bulk up a little bit, which again is just part of growing. It's a reason that you want them to go back to college. It's a reason they need that year in the AHL. You look back at Matt Boldy. Matt Boldy is a tall dude, but that was the first thing that needed to change about his game. Yes, you can handle the puck well. You need to learn how to play against men because that's going to be the biggest transition. And I think that's why Bill Guerin remains so patient with them, is because the AHL, nothing's going to wake you up a little bit quicker than the AHL, but even that is a level below the NHL for a reason when it comes to physicality, when it comes to just the sheer size of players. So height obviously plays a huge factor, especially just with the length of the stick and your arms in general, right? I mean, there's a reason Matt Zuccarello, the tiniest little guy on the team, has such an incredibly long stick, is so he can get that reach. But yeah, I think you're just going to want to make sure that these guys remain bulky, remain strong, remain everything that you need them to be, and there's time for them to grow because they are kids for all intents and purposes. You're ready for them to become men in the next couple of years. Be ready to take the team, because in the next couple of years, guys, as we've talked about, is when the Wild should be primed for a good run. The next couple of years, the buyouts are off the books. You should have the players in place, and these guys would be a part of that. And
the game just trends towards bigger guys now, right? I mean, at one time it was smaller guys. Now it's bigger physicality, and the Wild are in general a very small team. And I don't know if you can just fix that overnight, given the limited resources that they have at their cap disposal. So can you kind of, for lack of a better words, can you build bigger for the future? And that's also, I think, what they're trying to do here at these big power type centers, to try to bulk them up. And if one of them becomes a wing and transitions there, that's also fine too. But I think that's kind of the philosophy that they're trying to establish here.
Okay, so the free agency period begins Saturday morning. The Wild has been well established, like a few teams, no cap space. Starting with you, Jesse, do you expect any surprises, any trades, and any unforeseen? I'm sure they'll add, a guy here or there, a depth guy or something. That wouldn't surprise me. But do you expect surprises? And by that, I mean, is Marco Rossi being shopped? Because he sure doesn't seem to fit in the template of what they're doing now as far as size goes. But do you see a Saturday or a Sunday move that we would say, oh, whoa, didn't expect that?
I'm more likely now just watching what other teams are doing. If you're looking at the Central Division and what teams are doing to actively get better and change things, and granted, some of those teams, like the Winnipeg Jets, are in need of a complete turnover. Chicago, same situation, but Chicago is adding players like nothing. The fact that they just paid $4 million for Corey Perry is ridiculous, but they have the cap space to do so. But it makes them better as well, right? I mean, I think Bill Guerin might have to be a little bit more active than he originally wanted to be, just based on looking at what the Central has done, what they are doing. And that might mean, again, some favorites that Minnesota players are gone. Maybe Freddie Gaudreau is an option. Why not? I mean, maybe Jared Spurgeon's an option.
Dean would
maybe players
Dean
like
would
that
quit.
are options. I know.
Dean
I'm
would
just
quit
saying.
if you traded Goudreau.
You have two untouchables, right? You have Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy. Maybe Jonas Brodin. Those would be maybe your three. The rest, I mean, you have to listen and entertain. Again, you don't want to bring it. You want to be smart about it because you don't need to bring in an immediate impact player necessarily, but you need somebody that would help change the dynamic of the team. So I think looking again at the Central Division teams getting better, getting stronger. I know we've all kind of maybe come to terms that the playoffs might not happen this year, but Bill Guerin's certainly going to want to try to still have a competitive team, which means you have to do something. And they have to shed cap space. I mean, ultimately, that's what they do. I know he joked at the draft that the agents seem to think that the cap space skyrocketed to 10 million additional. It didn't. It's 1 million extra for them. So, I mean, their changes are coming, and it might be more surprising than I initially thought.
I think with the limited resources, unless it's just like some vet minimum guys, which I totally expect to happen, I think you actually might see more trades than signings in terms of getting something of impact, getting of something that's significant, of significant importance. Basically, they just don't have the cap resources to sign someone really. So you're going to have to get more creative there, and that probably means making a trade of an established player or trading with some of your prospects or trading future picks to bring in someone to offset some of that. So I think honestly, if I'm betting, I bet they go that route instead of trying to make a big splash because they physically can't. So they have to make a very similar NBA like trade where you have to match salaries essentially and try to figure out the best way to do that, because with their limited cap resources, I just don't know who they can really sign that's going to make you kind of get excited for the season.
This class, though, from a free agency standpoint, it's a great one to miss. It's a bunch of old guys who are going to sign short-term contracts. And look, you know what? July 1st has turned into, and this happened long ago, overpay day. If you look at it, how many guys on July 1st and 2nd are signed to ridiculous contracts that are not worth it? So I would actually say this. If there's any year, especially not to have cap room, Jess, this is a good one as far as that goes, because it removes the temptation. It removes the temptation, even from a guy, as you just mentioned, who got bought out today, Blake Wheeler, who I have no interest in at this age, but guys like that who strike me as sort of Fletch guys, right? Like Fletcher would have been like, I'm going to bring him back here. I am delighted that the temptation is removed from Guerin's plate, so to speak, by not having cap space for what I really think is not really an attractive free agency class at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the only thing that worries me about this new trend of them wanting to bring guys home and let them ride off into the sunset, because that would be the perfect thing for Blake Wheeler, right? And he's got size, he's good up the middle, he's proven. And I take exception to this because he is the same exact age as me. He's like a month younger. He is old, though. We're old. You can't play the game at this. I mean, that's the one concern I have with him. And then there's also, we talked about it with Mark Scheifele, too, the concern about the locker room that Winnipeg had to deal with. What level did Blake Wheeler play to that? He was a captain for a very, very long time there. How much does he have that? It's hard to believe, having spoken with him personally and knowing his parents, that he would be that way, but you never know. I mean, he might not be the type of guy that you'd want behind the locker room door. So, yeah, I'd pass. I know there's the reporter in me is like, oh, that would be fun. Yay, it's another great storyline. But from a team standpoint, it's not going to do you much. It's throwing away money for another, as you said, Judd, another year-long contract, and that's it. So I just think they'll probably stay away from that, hopefully.
Hey, Dex, of the guys who have come across the wire today as being bought out, is there anyone who intrigues you if this team had some cap space? Because it's a fairly long list of guys who got bought out today.
I mean,
Friday.
if you had better character issues, I'd be all in on Duchesne. But I have more questions of his off the ice stuff than I do on the ice. On the ice, he's still a very good player, and he would make the Wild a lot better, even though he's now 32 years old. He still drives playmaking ability. He has playmaking abilities, and he drives offense. But I have some questions there. You know, if Blake Wheeler wants to take the vet minimum, I also saw his agent said he wants to go to an Eastern Conference team to have a new challenge or something. It's like, Blake, you're 36. Like, there's no new challenges that are needed here, pal. You were a captain. It was a great run. There's no new challenges that are needed. If you want to chase a cup in the East, okay, I understand that. Eastern's a little more deeper than the West. But if Blake wants to come home on a $1 million deal 1 year, I'm fine with that. But if they had more cap space, I'd be a little bit more interested in Duchesne. But as of now, no. I still think finding a trade partner would be the better route.
And Jess, you hit on a very key point though. So I have no problem with drafting local kids, like from the state. If they're good, draft them. I love that. I'm totally with you though on, like, for instance, the Goligoski thing, and now he won't waive his no trade. So he's like, I'll just come back and play occasionally. I mean, he plays his bigger role in that damn team as we do from the press box. So those to me are two very different conversations. But if you're saying beware of this thing of, the vet from Minnesota, totally with you. Let's stop that. Let's not do that. It would have to be the right guy, but Goligoski, and then you've got guys that might want to come back. I am all for drafting them. I am very much against, unless it's a guy that's going to fit. And you know what? Most of them don't seem to, including the two guys who got 13-year contracts. So yeah, I side with your view here, which is, oh boy, it's a great story. It's a fun takeout piece to write, but is it really a productive move?
Right, exactly. Maybe TJ Oshie I would take if that was a maybe, but even he's old. Those are people of my
really
generation. You
hurt
just
all the time.
Really
you guys
old.
get hurt a lot. You're very old. You get hurt.
I know. I threw out my back on 18 earlier, so that's
exactly
how I am. Right.
Hey, last thing for you guys. The Blackhawks obviously drafted Bedard, and they are speaking of veteran guys. Jesse mentioned Corey Perry, Nick Foligno was traded for, and his rights were traded for, but just signed as well. And then the Blues had 3 first-round picks, and the Blues are going to, the Blues do not want to go into a rebuild. They are trying to do a retool. Starting with you, Jesse. How much do those two teams stand out to you as far as improvement? Maybe not in 2023-24, but pretty quick, especially when the starting point, and I'm not saying Stanley Cup, but I'm just saying a pain in the ass for the Wild when the starting point is Connor Bedard, who is supposed to be, like McDavid, a generational type of talent.
Oh gosh, I mean, we are going to be treated to a Calder race for the ages next year with Connor Bedard, Shane Wright, Matthew Nyes in Toronto. I mean, it's going to be a tremendous rookie class coming in, and I'm so excited to see that in general. But yeah, Chicago's making moves. I mean, they feel like, I'm sure, quote unquote, they've done their time down in the rebuild mode. Now we're ready to come surging out. So I think they are going to be a problem. Again, they're spending money like it's nothing because they can, and they're trying these different pieces out that are going to make them better even in the immediate interim. Still don't know they're not going to make a deep run, but they're certainly not going to be bottom rung. Granted, they're not losing out for a top round pick anyway, but that's neither here nor there. St. Louis too. I love St. Louis's coach. I think Craig Berube is a fantastic coach. I think he gets what he needs out of each and every player, no matter what style of player it is either. So yeah, those two teams are going to be coming. Minnesota, again, cannot stay stagnant. I think for years they've been able to just kind of hoe and hum along, and I think they're finally realizing they can't anymore. They're going, and that's why, to your point, Judd, and to your point, Dex, there's going to have to be some sort of movement this offseason just to keep pace, just to not be that bottom rung team, because that's not a situation Minnesota's ever been in. They might have missed the playoffs, but they've never been at the bottom of the barrel. And if they don't start changing some things, tweaking some things, making some moves, that's where they're going to be.
Yeah, I think Chicago's in position here to maybe pop right back up. Yeah, I mean, do they do their hard time? I don't know. And I know they're kind of been a PR nightmare over the last year, and they're trying to dig themselves out of there as well. I love that they have I think their coach can have some success here too. I love that they didn't just go down to the old well. And yeah, I mean, we look at the Central Division, it's always been a gauntlet and a tough sledding for most teams. But the Wild aren't bad enough to completely bottom out pending, an injury to Kaprizov or Brodin or something. So there'll still be a competitive team. It's just how competitive will they indeed be? Like, are they going to take a step back? And is that step back a wild card berth? Is that step back out of the picture? I guess we still have to kind of wait and to see how their roster kind of fills out.
Playoff team, you think, Jesse, for the Wild?
No, I kind of just want to see it happen too, just to get their footing back beneath them. Like, instead of being happy to be here, we're here. Like, I kind of want you to feel the pain of missing out a little bit. But I say that every year too. I think every year, I don't know if they're a bubble team, and they surprise me. So who knows?
And we get on the golf course earlier in that case too. I know it's only like a week and a half earlier, but we get on the golf course earlier.
This is very true.
You two are incredible. There's nothing like a playoff run, but I agree with you. And the thing about this too, though, is so if they're not a playoff team for, and this might sound weird, the right reasons, I'm all for it. And the right reasons are you got to play your youth. Dean's got to play the kids. They got to find out with some of these kids. I mean, just to start with, as we've discussed basically since the season ended, Marco Rossi playing a game in Iowa next year makes 0 sense. Like, he's great in Iowa. We all know that, right? But you've got this core group. I mean, Brock Faber needs to get, and I think he will, important minutes every single game. And if he struggles, you can't sit him. If Kalen Addison's going to play, he needs to play now. Like, don't replace him with some slappy that you get from the Dallas or from the Ducks who Dallas gave away, you know? So, like, I think if you miss the playoffs because you played the kids, I'm for that. If you missed the playoffs, but you tried to milk it and tried to go get a couple veterans here and there, this ain't the year for that. So I think it's all in how you miss the playoffs. It's like this draft. You went and got centers. You needed them. Good for you. Like, Bill Guerin basically acknowledged without saying it that he has agreed with, I think, all three of us, which is you need good centers. The days of plug and play, well, you know, Kaprizov and Zuccarello are so good that I can put Judd Zolgad with those two. Well, no, you can't. Ryan Hartman ain't the guy either. So anyway, I think it's how you miss the playoffs, if you do, that's going to determine it. If you go down swinging with veterans, I'm out. I'm just completely out. Final thoughts,
So you want them, so let's clarify this then. So come trade deadline, say the Minnesota Wild are out of the picture, or maybe they're a couple points out to be a bubble team. You want to see nothing. All right.
I want to see them dump.
Okay.
I want to see them dump, and I want to see the kids play, because the kids, I believe the children of the future.
Okay, Whitney. All right.
All right.
Let's end there. All
Thanks,
right. Hit that
Jesse.
subscribe button.
Nope.
Daily
Great work.
Minnesota Sports Entertainment here on Score North. Pat, shoot, score.